Our next speaker this afternoon is Speaker Brandon Thomas of Club 3 Melbourne, who will be speaking to the topic Stairway to Heaven, and will have a warning bell at 8 minutes. Please welcome.
We were at the hospital watching her gasp for air as her defeated body drew its last breath of life. She was choking on the fluid on her lungs that was rapidly overcoming her. And in her desperate and futile attempt to save her own life, she was well and truly buying that stairway to heaven. And in those final moments, my mother looked at her own mother and said, "Mum, I love you and I forgive you." And the horror of that horrendous day that's forever scarred us will remain. And the most important part is that my mum was able to do two very important things. At the end of the day, we are all heading towards that inescapable end. And there's only one way to get there in peace. And that is to do two things. Two things that my mother was able to do for her mother. My grandmother. Grandmothers. You know, those amazing people that help raise you, that look after you, that nurture you, that are there for you in those formative years, that attend your school concerts. They encourage you to be the best that you can. My grandmother was a 4'0", well-dressed lady named Alma Mavis Cotton. 4'0", but could stand up to the tallest of them. Witty, funny, and always had a cheeky smile. But my mother grew up with a mother who had a terrible, terrible illness. It's one that we are all very familiar with in the society that we live in. My grandmother was a chronic alcoholic. My mother grew up with a bitter, raging, angry, brawling, violent, malicious alcoholic for a mother. My mother copped the beatings in her childhood. She tried to shelter her younger siblings from those beatings. She would scrounge around for some coins just to go to the local shop to find some bread so that she would have food in her stomach. My mother had her education robbed from her at 15 years of age, sent to a factory to work at 15, just so that she could earn a pittance of a wage that would be handed back to my grandmother so she could hit the bottle even harder. And in my grandmother's last 10 years of life, she suffered terribly. She had lung cancer, stomach cancer, aneurysms on the brain, Alzheimer's, dementia. And my mother was the full-time carer for her mother for those long, hard 10 years. And at the end of the day, without so much as a thank you, with not even an I'm sorry, my mother was able to love and forgive. Now, when I was a teenager, that's when my grandmother died. Now, my grandmother only had to say a few nasty words about me, in front of my family that deeply embarrassed and humiliated me. And that was enough for me to say, out of my life. Because I was a teenager, let's face it, right? Teenagers know best. And life smoothly sailed on into the future for me, wonderfully. No problems, I didn't tolerate that. I had good family, I had wonderful friends. I had a bestie from high school years. Into the 20s we went, thick as thieves. Until one day, that alcoholism reared its ugly head again. And that friend unleashed in an alcoholic tirade on me. Nasty, bitter words were spoken that could never be undone, that could never be forgiven. What was the simple solution? Easy. Do what you do with Alma Mavis Cotton. Out of my life. Put them over there. I didn't have to deal with it. Life went on again just fine for me. And then one day in the future, I received a phone call. And it was a phone call from that ex-friend's parents. There were many a phone call from that ex-friend over the years to say I'm sorry. What did I do with those phone calls? That, hung up on them. I even received letters from that friend trying to apologise. What did I do to those letters? Threw them away. But then the phone call from the parents came in. And they called me to tell me that that friend was dead. That friend had committed suicide. And that friend had left a suicide note. And there was a note with words to me. And that note said, I forgive you for not forgiving me. Ladies and gentlemen, I've had to live every single day from that day on with the pain of knowing that I did not give somebody the opportunity to be forgiven. My own bitterness, rage, anger had blinded me from seeing the right way forward. New Testament, Ephesians, chapter 4, verses 31 to 32. Get rid of all bitterness, rage, anger, brawling, slander, along with every form of malice. Be kind and considerate to one another, loving and forgiving each other. Look, you don't need to have read that book to know it's the right way. If Led Zeppelin, Stairway to Heaven is more your source, chapter 4 of that song says there are two roads that you can take, and there's still time to change the path you're on. Ladies and gentlemen, we have all been hurt in this life by people. We've probably hurt people in our lives as well. But I challenge each and every one of you to think about the people in your life that need forgiving. Today, for all of Alma Mavis's faults, that witty lady with lots of witty comments, I do remember so fondly one of her very witty ones at a very appropriate time when I was angry with somebody. And she said to me, anger, let it pass. It might pass like a kidney stone, but let it pass. Love and forgive. They are the steps today to take on the stairway to heaven. Love and forgive. Don't make this a highway of endless hell. Love and forgive, and set yourself free.